It's the After Show with TelecomTV's Guy Daniels and Ray Maistre.
Yes, welcome to the After Show on Telecom TV. I'm Guy Daniels, Director of Content, and we are broadcasting live and waiting to hear from you, our audience, at the end of day 2 of the DSP Leaders World Forum 2021. We have a great lineup of guests joining us again today, eager and willing to answer your questions. We've already received some, but please keep them coming. And if you haven't got in touch yet, then do so now using the form on the website below this video. It's time to introduce my co-host for the after show, Ray Maistre, Editorial Director at TelecomTV. Hello, Ray. Today's theme has been enhancing the ecosystem. What have been the highlights for you?
Well, Guy, it's just one long highlight as far as I'm concerned. We've gone one better than Oprah Winfrey because we have a one-to-one interview with Telefónica's CTIO, Enrique Blanco. We have 2 roundtable discussions defining a new DSP vendor dynamic for better business outcomes and strategic options for telco cloud deployments. And now we're breaking the internet with this live Q&A session. So let's crack on. Back to you, Guy.
Thank you, Ray. Well, hopefully we don't completely break it until Friday evening when we wrap up this year's week-long event. We can break it then. On with the show, and joining us live on the programme today are Matthias Fridström, who is Chief Evangelist at Telia Carrier, Peter Wennerstrom, who is Senior Manager, Product Development, Security and Routing at NetNumber, Klaus Martini, Senior Programme Manager with Deutsche Telekom, Danielle Royston, CEO and founder of Telco DR, and Peter Wennerstrom, Head of Strategy, Business Development and Business Operations for Europe at Nokia. Well, hello everyone, good to see you all again. Lots of audience questions to get through in the next 45 minutes or so. So Ray, over to you to start us off.
Thanks, Guy. Matthias, before we start, a quick question for you, and we're going to be asking this of all of our guests today and this week. What got you into telecoms? How did you start your career in this industry? Wow. Okay, so great milestone for you then this year, 25 years, excellent. Right, so let's get straight into the first question from our audience. So Matthias, does the telecom infrastructure market need new blood? Do we need more developers and technology suppliers for the operators to choose from? Or are there already enough suppliers, or perhaps even too many? What do you think?
Yeah, I'm glad you didn't ask about service providers because I think there are too many of them. But when we look at the infrastructure side, I really think, on the European market, there are enough fibers out there. But that's a big problem on the North American market and some of the other markets around the world. But especially the North American market, we lack long distance fiber there. And there's really nothing being built at the moment because everyone is focused on 5G in the cities. So that's a big problem on that side. On the more box side of this, I think the newest development with optical line systems being open and the fact that you can run IP over DVDM in a much smarter way when you come up to the 400 gig speed, I think that's opening up that type of market really, really well right now. And I would argue that we do have good competition in that market. You can always have more providers of equipment, and the more you can mix and match and put people together and find the best price of the day and so on. That's always good for a telecom operator because we always need to get our cost per megabit down every year, every month, every week. But I would argue that currently I don't see a need of more, desperately don't see a need of more providers for parts of the market. I think we have enough suppliers as it is right now. We just need to select the best gear from the best supplier at that time and then use that, So I think, we're fairly okay right now.
Okay, excellent. Would anybody else like to come in on that question at all?
Yeah, I'm working for a vendor, so supplier. So possibly it depends on the type of equipment and the type of solution. I take it for the hard infrastructure, the cables, and so what has been said. But if you are looking to software, the market is far more open to specialized players with cloud native solutions and so. And having special players on specific topics, then definitely there is more room for innovation and new developments. So I think it is depending on the type of product and layer in the technology.
Okay, excellent point. Great, thanks, Pieter. Okay, great. Well, if we don't have any more answers to that question, we'll head straight over to Guy for question 2.
Thank you, Ray. And we're going to go straight back to Pieter because I want to welcome him back to the program and ask the question we're asking everyone, which is how you got into telecoms. Tell us how you started in this industry.
Well, I started in electrical engineering, but that was the hard power type of engineering in the power grids and so. And when I finished my university in that direction, then there was very low employment. That was the beginning of the 80s. So then I decided to go on and start to the other university and graduated in Master of Science of Electrical Engineering, but now in computer science. And then that was my entry into the telecom market by joining KPN, the main operator, still PTT at that time. But it was a fancy adventure, doing a lot of traveling, being active in standardization. And 7 years ago, I switched, say, the side of the table. I went to the vendor. And that is a very different perception. And it has its own challenges, but it's a great adventure now working for a small company and being in the top of the new developments.
Great. Thanks very much for that. It must be hard for a lot of people now to think back to what the telecoms was like in the 80s and the different dynamic that was going on then. Back to our viewer questions, though. And we've got one in here, Pieter, for you, which is, how can the public cloud platforms play a role in the development of 5G roaming services?
Yeah, that's a great question. What we generally see is that the public cloud is becoming more mature, and that is also becoming more acceptable for the industry. And that is partly also caused by the fact that, for instance, the whole 5G system is being developed with IT systems in mind. The protocol stacks are similar. The deployment models are becoming similar. So the distinction that we had for many decades between IT industry and telecom industry is evaporating very quickly. Having said that, there is still a lot of considerations to whether public cloud is really to be used because of different regulatory regimes, but also that is starting to harmonize. Privacy regulations, whether personal data may be stored in other countries, and so there are still a lot of hurdles to be passed. But in general, this trend is not being stopped anymore. However, the conditions under which this can be used, that is still developing. And for 5G roaming, it is definitely a marketplace that the public cloud can be used because the public cloud offers far more simpler deployment models, and also outsourcing becomes less of a problem when that is in cloud native environments in the public cloud being organized.
Okay, thank you very much, Peter. And Danielle, I'm sure you'd like to respond to this question.
Yeah, I have like a more specific example of someone that's trying to do something in this area. I mean, I don't know that if it's specifically 5G, but as we start to think about eSIM becoming a more popular application that people are deploying, I know of a carrier in Western Europe that's the global eSIM provider for roaming provider for Apple. And so when I was back at Optiva, we deployed a charger that would replicate the data around the world so that as people were roaming, they would have very fast latency to GCP data centers. And so that's a really great example of using the public cloud. Traditionally, you would have had, these applications pinging your data centers back in your home country, or maybe you have two different data centers. But now with Google's footprint, right, you can have your data literally wherever you want it to be, and latency is super quick and the application works. And so with this kind of idea, and I think there's going to be several applications, you can leverage their footprint. They've invested in making databases that can be replicated very easily around the world, instant consistency, and that's really hard to replicate yourself and build that software. And so I've been saying this for years now, stand on the shoulders of the public cloud providers, leverage their software. I think a lot of people think of the public cloud providers as hardware and infrastructure providers, but really it's about the software they provide that you get to leverage, that they continuously innovate on, and you can leverage for your benefit as a carrier. And I think that's where everyone sort of needs to shift to. It's not just about the compute and the hardware that they provide, it's a software that they provide. And I think this example, it's actually TruePhone that does it, and it works great for them.
Thank you, Danielle. Thank you very much for that. Two great responses there. Any of our other guests want to pick up on this viewer question? If not, then let's go back to Ray because we're getting a lot of questions in. Let's go back to Ray for our next question.
Okay, great. Thanks, Guy. So Klaus from Deutsche Telekom, what got you into telecoms? How did you get started in this industry?
Okay, that was not yesterday. I started my first day in business 1st of September 1972. And as I entered this business, it was more or less a stable business. But it was a journey, and this journey continues still going on. And there's also a huge advantage to be in this business. If I compare what we did in these days, and most of the time I was in the radio part of the telco networks, and a lot of things have changed in the meantime, and it's really interesting to see in which direction we are moving on now. Now we're talking also about cloud native stuff, we're talking about more IT infrastructure. If you compare that with the situation I started, there's a huge difference, and that is the reason why I'm so happy to be in this industry, because it's really a big advantage there. To be involved in this great discussion that we always have in the market.
Great, excellent. So Klaus, we've got a question come in, and I feel that this has probably come as a result of one of the panel discussions today, one of the round tables. And the question is, do the telecom operators need a new way to engage with their vendor partners and suppliers? Does the relationship need to change as the network architectures and operational processes evolve?
I think that's a great question, because it's such a very important point which we're discussing internally and externally across the market. Because the situation has completely changed in the last couple of years. New vendors coming on board, new small companies like to be involved in discussion. And all of that has an impact on how we collaborate and we cooperate between all involved parties, between vendors, operators, and developers. I think the developers are completely new in this game. And that definitely has an impact on all processes on the operator side as well. And from that point of view, I think that I expect a lot of changes in this area. Okay,
interesting. So, yes, Matthias.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with Klaus, and I really think the new way of mixing and matching equipment is going to hugely change the way we as a telecom operator work with our vendors. Because typically 5 years ago, you kind of almost outsourced one part of your network to one supplier, and you bought everything from them. And if you had a problem, you called them, and they were on the case immediately. But now, when you're going to mix and match a lot of equipment in your network and a lot of software and a lot of other stuff in the network, the operators themselves needs to take a much bigger responsibility for operations. And what we need to talk to our vendors about is very different. We need to have support from them, but we can't outsource the problem to them. And I think that's a huge difference from just a couple of years ago when we just called the vendor and sat back in our chairs and hoped they would solve it. That's not going to happen anymore. We need to take that responsibility ourselves, and that's going to hugely change the way operators and vendors works.
Okay, interesting. And Pieter Net Number, you want to come in here?
What is also now being seen is that security is becoming more and more a concern, particularly in the mobile industry, because our mobile is now being used as part of our daily life and so on. You all know how dependent you are nowadays on your mobile, even for your daily transactions. But it also has security awareness considerations because of that. And we all know the discussions about Chinese vendors, and so certification programs are now being established, particularly for the software, because software is something that needs to be trusted, and certification schemes are now being underway, partly being regulated, partly being an initiative of the industry itself. So there is a different type of arrangement to be seen between the operators and the vendors for making that work.
Okay, excellent. And Klaus, you wanted to come back in and make another point?
Yeah, for sure. I'm completely agree what the colleague said before, but I think more important is that softwareization has a much bigger impact on the industry than the hardware components, which it had in the last couple of years if we focus on hardware. But now the softwareization of all of the things has much bigger impact on the industry and how we collaborate and cooperate. And I think that is really a challenge for the industry to find the right setup. How we collaborate and cooperate. We do it cooperate between us in the industry, and that makes it also really interesting to work on this topic on the softwareization, cloudification, on all of that, because all of that has a huge impact, as I said.
Well, it's been really interesting to see the different dynamics in the industry, different relationships changing just in the past 6 to 9 months. And I'm sure we're going to see a lot more of that in 2021. Okay, Guy, let's move on. Next question from you.
Thank you, Ray. And just before we do, a quick reminder to our viewers, keep the questions coming, please, and we'll get through as many of them as we can. Right. Danielle, question to you, and this is our question we're asking everyone, of course. What got you into telecoms? How did you start in the telecoms industry?
Well, unlike most people in telecoms, I'm actually new to the industry. I'm a baby. I've been here since 2017 when I became a CEO of a publicly traded telecom software vendor. And so I guess what got me here and this long journey is, I guess it started when I was a kid. I was a math nerd. I loved to play video games, and I really fell in love with computers. And so I decided to major in computer science. And I got into enterprise software, and it sort of sounds like a super lame, area, but I really fell in love with talking to businesses, understanding how they were trying to solve their problems, and using software to help them run more efficiently, make their businesses better. And so that's always been really exciting. And so when I became CEO of a publicly traded company in Canada, what I thought was maybe a boring, sleepy industry turned out not to be the case. I found sort of my software expertise and my experience in other industries, I found a great opportunity to disrupt the industry. And all I do is talk about the public cloud. I'm really excited about bringing the public cloud to this industry that kind of really focuses on networks and hardware, but there's this huge software component. And I think you've heard on this little Q&A panel here of how much software is disrupting the hardware of the industry. And I'm really excited to drive it. And it wakes me up and gets me out of bed every morning. I'm so excited to participate in this industry.
Yes, telecoms is not stodgy, it's not boring, it is extremely vibrant at the moment, and who knows what our future has in store for us. Question from our audience directly to you, Danielle. Let me read this one out. Will the greater involvement of public cloud players in the communications industry lead to a broader ecosystem of service providers, as well as inspiring more technology developers?
I think at the end of the day, the BFCs, as I like to call them, the hyperscalers, the public cloud vendors, are software providers, right? That's at their core what they are and what they're really bringing to this industry. And I think as we've been discussing today, software loves to chomp on hardware. It loves to eat it and really bring down the cost of business in hardware intensive areas. It's happened in every industry, and we see it happening now in telco. Open RAN probably being the most obvious example on the network side. But I think it's going to happen. It's going to be just sweeping. Just wherever you can put in software, it will happen. It will lower the cost. Yes, there's questions around security and who's the provider, but I think those are easily solved. There's tools to solve that. And so I think it's going to bring a whole new vibrant class of software, a higher quality. We're going to see instead of telcos all solving the same problem themselves over and over again. I mean, you think about the problems you guys solve, the carriers, everyone's solving the same problems. I think there's room for web scale applications. I have a talk that aired earlier this morning about that, about the idea of having singular platforms that everyone leverages and pays for as a service. And it brings down your TCO by 80%. And it helps the carriers to focus on what's most important, which is the subscriber relationship and really building up loyalty, which has not existed. People swap really easily, put in extra SIMs into their phone. Voice traffic is going down. And I think instead of sort of always touting it's all about 5G or 6G or 17G, instead kind of flipping the script and starting to focus really on the subscriber relationship. And that's the valuable piece. And I think software is going to really drive that. So, yeah.
Thank you, Danielle. And I guarantee I will not be here for 17G. I will be long retired by then. That is my plan. Anybody else like to comment on how the public cloud providers are perhaps expanding our ecosystem?
Very much agree with Danielle there, of course. But I think, like 5 years ago, no one even talked about underlay and overlay in the telecom industry and the carrier industry. And now everyone talks about that because telecom operators can just come in from the side and put an overlay in there using whatever is built underneath and just become a telecom operator within almost no time because of public cloud and this. It's really broadened the ecosystem, and we've seen numerous service providers coming in the last couple of years that becomes almost successful overnight. Just because the industry is so changeable these days.
Good point. Thank you for that. And Klaus?
I have a question for Daniela. You're talking about relationship to the customer relationship and the operators. What is your expectation? What kind of impact will we have on the customer relationship if you compare the relationship from an operator point of view with a couple of years ago and in the future? What is a major change what you are expecting in this kind of relationship?
Yeah, thanks for the question. I believe that operators and carriers have this unique position to be able to build an amazing mobile app and put it on the home screen of the mobile phones that they are supporting. Every big tech company wants to get on the home screen of the mobile app, of the mobile phone. And carriers have this capability and they don't leverage it. The relationship you have with your telco is primarily through that app, most people just use it as bill presentment, maybe top up. But how often does anyone go into their mobile app and see what's going on with their carrier? And so I think it starts there. I think there's an opportunity to massively improve the quality of the mobile app experience that the telco is putting out there for their subscribers. I think the universally shared experience that subscribers have with their telco is not great. I mean, there's probably pockets here and there where there's a couple of telcos and carriers and MVNOs that are really focusing on it. But in general, people aren't like excited to call their telco whenever they have a problem with their SIM. You know, my mom actually calls me when she needs help because I'm pretty technical and I can help her like reset her SIM and figure out what's going on. And so I think this is the valuable piece that people are missing. This is the opportunity that, you know, if there's something to protect from the hyperscalers, right? The hyperscalers would love to have the relationship with your subscribers. And right now it's hugely neglected. And so, you know, we talk about digital transformation and being able to understand where the customer is on their journey. But in general, I mean, I live in the United States. AT&T is not really, people don't really talk about great customer service with AT&T. I mean, they're trying, but it's compared to like, you know, startups in other industries. I mean, the apps, I think I just did research on this. I think all the mobile apps of all the telcos in the world, the average rating is 3.5. These should be 5-star reviews. 5-star reviews, and it's 3.5. And that just tells you everything about the experience people are having with their subscribers, with their telcos. The subscribers are not having a great experience. And it's an afterthought, right? We focus on the network and we talk about 5G. All the commercials in my country are all 5G, 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 and not about, you know, this is what we're doing to make you stay, make you grow your revenue with us. And I think that's where we need to spend the next 10 years really focusing on that.
Ray, I think we better move on and hand over to you for our next question.
Okay, thanks, Guy. So Peter from Nokia, what got you into this industry? What got you started in telecoms?
Well, actually, I studied telecoms at university. So I got a Master of Science degree in telecoms in Sweden, where I'm from. So when I came out of the university, I looked for a job, and this was about 20 years ago. And at the time, Ericsson pretty much hired everyone who came out of the university studying telecoms. But I really felt that the guys across the street were far more interesting. So I went to work as an account manager at Nokia, and I've never looked back, really. It's been a great journey for the past 20 years.
Okay, excellent. All right, with one company for a long time. Good to hear. The question we have here, and you know, we've already been talking about relationships with the hyperscalers, the big web scale companies already. But a lot of the time we're talking about the relationship between the service providers and the hyperscalers. But we have a question, how will the relationship between vendors, the technology developers, and the hyperscalers impact the development of the 5G sector? Do you have a view on that?
Sure. I think it will do that in several ways. And to give you just one example, we have a partnership at Nokia together with Google, where we deploy 5G core on public cloud. And that basically gives another alternative of how to build infrastructure as a service provider. So a service provider can use that 5G core in a public cloud. Right? Another example would be that fundamentally there is an ecosystem need in 5G. We want innovation power to come to develop the new apps on 5G, the new use cases that we never even thought of. And that needs to come from an ecosystem, which I think the hyperscalers can help to enable. But for us as a vendor, and I think this somehow gets forgotten sometimes when we talk about the hyperscalers being such powerhouses of software, underlying that software and making, enabling the connectivity, enabling all these software functionalities to work seamlessly for the end user is an incredibly powerful hardware infrastructure of very resilient IP and optics and fiber and transport connectivity platforms, which we, of course, are part of delivering. So we are a big supplier to the hyperscalers, obviously.
Absolutely. Yes, it's definitely a multifaceted relationship. So thanks for those insights, Peter. And Klaus, I can see you want to come in on this one.
Yes, the answer of Peter brings me to an interesting, from my point, interesting question. You are talking about the relationship between hyperscalers and the classical vendors like Nokia. Do you see also the situation will be changed in the relationship between operator like Deutsche Telekom and Nokia, maybe becoming more in the competition mode, because if you're looking about the campus network technology, if you are offering some service to some big companies, then you are like in the market of Deutsche Telekom, for example, then you have a competition situation. Do you expect this one? And if yes, what does it mean for the relationship between operators and vendors?
Well, that's a great question, Klaus, and I think it speaks to the heart of how the entire ecosystem is evolving, right? Now, let's be very transparent, right? For Nokia, the vast majority of our business comes from our carrier service provider customers, right? So we value that relationship very, very highly. So of course we would avoid to get into a competition situation with you because we want to primarily to be your supplier, right? But we have this, I would call it friendly co-opetition from time to time, right? because we can be both a supplier and a customer and perhaps in the future a competitor to you. But I would expect us to do that in a friendly way, so to speak, because we have a long-standing relationship with you and the other CSPs, right?
And I guess this comes back to this is the changing relationship, the changing dynamics. There is going to be that greater mix of relationship, maybe between different teams within certain companies, having different types of relationships with suppliers, partners, customers, etc. Danielle, you wanted to come in here as well.
Yeah, if there's anyone that's in between a rock and a hard place, it's the vendors. I think the hyperscalers absolutely enable a lot of rapid innovation for those vendors to adopt. And it's there for the taking. You just have to go in, learn how to use it, and refactor old applications and start to leverage the new technology. But I think this comes back to the carriers that demand that these vendors support super old technology, or like literally everything that's been invented prior to this moment. The RFPs that the vendors get, these 500-page, 1,000-page RFPs that the vendors spend literally hundreds of thousands of dollars responding to get the mega deals from the big carriers, where we have to respond to every single technology that's ever been invented in the past, what we're supporting currently, and what we want to do in the future. Forces the vendor to keep things agnostic, keep things nimble, keep things flexible, and actually kills innovation. It really does. And so we really need the carriers to say, hey, we really are going to step into this new world of digital transformation, right? We're going to think about things in a completely new way. We're going to deprecate. We're actually going to stop supporting old plans or old technologies and end it so that the vendors can actually leverage a new technology. And so there's pressure from the carriers, innovate from the vendors. And the vendors are like, well, I want to, but you keep making me support things from 1975 and I can't do it all. And so I think it's actually a three-way little triangle here, is that we need the carriers to move forward, really embrace innovation that will free up the vendors to adopt it, and the hyperscalers have it available. And I think things will be cheaper, things will be faster, revenue will grow, but you gotta let go of stuff. You can't hold on to everything and keep doing everything for everyone. And so change needs to happen.
Yeah, and I think this is a bit of what Klaus was alluding to earlier in terms of change coming in all parts of the process and relationship, including the RFI, RFP, and procurement process. So it's definitely a big area of change, and things are definitely moving on there. Speaking of moving on, I think we should move on in the interest of time, because we've had more questions in from the audience. So I'm going to hand back to Guy to take us into a different stage of this program.
Thank you, Ray. And just before we move on to our next viewer question, let me quickly tell you about the series of polls we are running. Now, every day this week, we are posting a new poll question related to the theme of the day. Each question is a simple multiple choice, 5 answers, basically ranging from I agree to I disagree. It only takes a few seconds, so please click on your choice of answer and have your say. The poll is right here on the website. Now, today's question is, are telcos capable of reinventing their procurement processes and engaging more easily with a broader ecosystem of potential suppliers and partners? And you can see the current split on the screen here. This is real-time data coming in from the poll, and it does skew towards the yes, I agree, but there's still quite a few in the middle who are a little bit unsure of themselves. So look, if you want your vote counted, please go ahead and click on the poll. Right, back to our Q&A, and we've got about 10 minutes or so to get a few more questions in. So over to you, Ray, for our next viewer question.
Okay, excellent. So this is a question that's just come a little bit earlier, and I'm going to open this up to the group to see who wants to take this first. And it comes back a little bit to that political situation that was referenced earlier on. The question is, will the shift away from globalization and an increased focus on national or regional telecoms technology developments destroy some segments of the market? So I think this question is alluding to, a greater focus on national and regional developments and a greater need for different areas of the world wanting to be the 5G leader and the 6G leader. So does anybody want to pick up on this? Are we the shift away from globalization? Is this going to impact the market? Pieter from NetNumber.
Yeah, that's definitely a topic that is on top of mind, and it has of course, a setback that if the market becomes more fragmented, then it becomes more difficult to sell equipment and solutions and make money out of it. On the other hand, software with its possibilities to customize and develop, and so there it is not that much of a fear, I would say. But on the broader scale, the mobile industry has grown very rapidly over the last decades because of the globalization. So if that is becoming more complicated, then we possibly also will see that the mobile industry will have an impact, and it's difficult to foresee how that is happening. You see it already happening in some areas where there are bans on software, on specific materials, but how it will finally work out to the whole industry is to foresee. But software is definitely something that makes the industry somewhat more stable to it.
Yeah, well, certainly never a dull moment. Lots of different factors pulling the industry in lots of different ways. Matthias?
Yeah, no, I actually think also part of this is because traffic patterns have really changed globally. The days when you built if you're a large global enterprise, you practically built an MPLS network all around the world with all the traffic going back to the headquarters, because that's where you had the mail service and that's where you had everything else in terms of applications. More than 80% of the traffic from an enterprise today in a remote part doesn't need to go that way anymore. It needs to go to the closest cloud. And I think that's also really changed the way traffic is flying from global to much more regional, national, because you want your traffic to the closest cloud, and that's typically a cloud very close to where you are. So I think this is also, there's a built-in change in the world in the way enterprises run their networks these days compared to 5 years ago.
Okay, interesting. Yes, Klaus.
Yeah, one additional thought that's coming in my mind. If you're talking about this globalization impact on the local area, yes, the traffic will go more local than it is was in the old days. But it's only a question how we manage the traffic. But concerning the business, does it have an impact on the business side? I don't think so. If we're only talking about traffic management, I think then it's only a question how we manage that, as I said. And coming to the developers, is more stuff is localized. I don't think so either that it has an impact, because developers are working worldwide and they are developing their apps also worldwide. I'm not really clear is that impact that huge as we're discussing it here.
I think, it would just be as countries nationalize, and I think the intent is initially to like protect the resources in the country, bring jobs and keep the economy kind of in country. If you live in a country where you have access to great talent, then this might work. I think not every country has access to great software talent. It'd be a real shame not to take advantage of literally, the three largest, best technology firms in the world that give you access to fantastic technology and leverage it for your business. I think the cost of business for the telcos in those very nationalistic kind of approaches will suffer. Their cost of business will be higher, their innovation rate will be slower. And so ultimately the subscribers will end up suffering. And what is a move to like protect them ends up hurting them. And I think governments do that all the time and don't really realize sort of the downstream effects. And so I'm sort of a globalist, really a big fan of leveraging, the world's best if you can do it. Run through all your processes, make sure it's secure, make sure it passes all your security checks. But I think these big hyperscalers are just going to continue to expand their data centers. Eventually, there'll be data centers in every single country. You'll be able to control the location of your data and leverage their software and services for your gain. And so I think keep an open mind and don't go towards the national sort of route. Keep a global mindset.
Well, your inference that politicians don't always know what they're doing, it might not be too controversial, but it might be on the mark. But Peter, I think you wanted to come in on this as well.
Yeah, just one thing we maybe take for granted these days is that we have global standards, and those global standards, actually imply a total global connect. You can take your mobile phone and whichever country in the world you land in, you switch it on, it works and it connects. And that's because we have very resilient global standards. A hard degree of nationalization might endanger that, which I think would be problematic for the overall connectivity worldwide.
No, great point. So, Guy, we're coming up close to the time, but have we got time to squeeze one more quick question in?
We do. We can always squeeze a quick question in. Okay, probably for our final viewer question for today's after show, and it's on the software theme. In the world of DevOps, what role do external parties play as operators themselves are becoming software factories? Oh, Danielle, let's go straight over to you for that one.
Yeah, I'll take it as a software nerd. So, it takes, don't underestimate how hard it is to build a great software team. Just because you have a set of computer scientists doesn't mean it's great. It probably takes at least a decade, I'd say, to build a super great software company, I think, and software team. I think tier ones have this capability. They have the big budgets. They can they have the big names and they can attract the talent. I think when you start to think about tier twos and tier threes, their ability to build great software teams is diminished. And so I don't think, for all the telcos that they're all going to build software factories themselves, maybe a handful here and there that have the capability, that are located in countries with great talent. But I think when you look globally and up and down at all the different levels, I think it's actually going to shift the other way. I think you're going to give vendors more and more of your work to do so that you can focus on what I've been talking about, your subscribers, your business, right? Instead of wrestling with the infrastructure and CI/CD and Kubernetes and all of these technical components, give that to someone that's an expert in that and does it really, really well. And instead focus your teams on spend your organizational energy on what really matters, which is designing plans that steal subscribers, conquest them from your competitors, attract subscribers, keep them there, and grows your ARPU. That's what you're in business for. You're not in business to be awesome software houses. You're in business to attract and grow subscribers. And so focus your organizational energy on that.
Focus on your knitting. Good advice. Pieter from NetNumber, come to you first, and then we go to Matthias.
Yeah, in general, I agree with what Danielle was saying. It depends, of course, at what layer of the industry you are looking, also from, say, a supplier and product view. So definitely software development within an operator is somewhat problematic, but the bigger ones will definitely do. Possibly the smaller ones will still depend on software type of houses. So for the smaller operators, there is possibly still room for external partners. But what I would like to add here is that, say, the vendors that are providing the solutions, like we do, we will see that the software products that we are delivering are more open to and programmable than before. And that we are providing the accurate tools, that it's not only easy to program, and it is a stable infrastructure based on open software products that are being used in the right manner according to standards. And then either the software is within the operator itself, the bigger operators, or it is an external software house that can then leverage these products if they have the right programmable and flexible manners, and that not for every new feature the operator or the external partner has to come back to the supplier.
Thank you, Peter. And Matthias?
Yeah, no, I fully understand what Danielle's saying, but I'm feeling the other way around. We as a telecom operator are super afraid of being locked in by a software developer who don't really understand what we want, and try to explain to them what we really want is for us, too difficult. And therefore, I think we, at least as an operator, will bring in more people in-house. I appreciate it's going to take a long time. Yes, it will. But we feel, we need to take over our own destiny in some way. Of course, we're going to use experts from the outside, but I think we need quite a big group of people internally who can do the software development the way we want it. And I think many telecom operators are very afraid of being left behind if they outsource that.
Yes, absolutely. Klaus, top right.
I slightly disagree with what she said. I completely agree with what the colleague said before. I think we need really more people in-house in the operator side in order to be able to run the CI/CD process, and that is how I see that. It will be difficult to do it with external stuff, external partners, if we do it today, because there's not the right experience inside and outside what is needed to run the CI/CD chain, and that is why I completely agree what the colleague said before. As I said, we need more internal stuff, more knowledge, more business, more knowledge how we do that, how we create software, and this kind of thing.
Thank you, Klaus. And we do love having a different range of views on Telecom TV. This is great for us. Peter, we haven't come to you, Nokia, for this particular question. If you want to answer, then please do. Or do you want a few comments, because we're going to have to wrap it up very soon?
Well, sure. Let me. I think there will need to be a complement of different solutions here. I believe that there's a role to play for a variety of players. I tend to think about this in terms of also the level of high resilience you need in certain parts of a network. And the ability to develop that might require a global scale that individual operators might have difficulty achieving on their own. So I think there will be components of global suppliers, local suppliers, and in-house development in most operators.
Thank you, Peter. Danielle, you wanted to come in and respond, I think, to Matthias, was it earlier?
Well, no, I think it's great. I think panels and Q&As are always better when there's a little bit of debate and controversy. And obviously, I struck a nerve with my commentary. I just think, for the largest operators, I think it is possible to do it yourself. I think you think about the small operators that are just getting absolutely crushed. They can't afford the software from the vendors. They can't attract the top talent. They can't build it themselves. And so what do? And so do they just disappear? And it's, the barrier for entry into this market becomes impossibly hard. I think you want that competition. And I think, there's applications like Salesforce and SAP and, a myriad of other applications out there that telcos use today right? They have not invented it themselves. Yes, there's components that you probably want to keep in-house because they're super sensitive and they have to be on the ground and they need to be close to the core or close to the edge or whatever it needs to be. But you don't need to invent everything. And I think what I see out there in the marketplace today is people are like, we're going to bring it all in-house and we're going to build it all ourselves. We're going to microservice it and stitch it all together. And I'm really curious to see if that's going to work. It might work for the big guys. I don't think it's going to work for the small guys.
Fantastic. Well, look, this is a great point to end the show because we are out of time and we certainly don't want to be paying overtime rates to all the crew, do we? Shocking. It's the end of the after show for today. Thank you all so much for joining us and taking part in this live program. We really appreciate your views and opinions, and to our audience for sending in your questions. Now, we'll be back tomorrow with another live after show program. In the meantime, Ray and I are going to head out and do the rounds of PR parties and open bars.
If only, that would be great. Well, if you haven't yet watched our 2 roundtables and keynote interviews from today, then they're available now to watch on demand, along with all of our other exclusive interviews.
Indeed they are. And tomorrow's theme at DSP Leaders World Forum is all about cultural transformation. And we've got 2 more roundtables for you, followed by our live Q&A show. So we hope to see you then. Goodbye for now.
The after show was recorded in front of a live online audience.